Hey everybody, what's happening? I am Tommy and you are on the Love Boat. It's hold on one second. I apologize, but I am working with several men that are trying to get sober. So every once in a while I'll get a text at an opportune time. Jane Aldrich, Barbara, I'm glad you're here. Listen, this isn't a subject that I thought I'd be doing a lot of revisiting on, but a lot of people have reached out and sent me emails and said, hey, what's going on? This guy's getting sentencing again in a couple of days. Is there any chance that you could weigh in on what's going on, since a lot of people are saying a lot of very different things on all wild ends of the spectrum in terms of what kind of time Diddy might get when he goes to court in a couple of days. So here's what we're looking at. Realistically, the federal sentencing system is very different in a lot of ways than the state. And there's a lot of things that you can do in the feds that you're not going to get away with in the state. But there's also guidelines. Hey, Audra in Denver, B-Lady, good to see you. What's happening? Hey, Arwa. So there's a lot of things that are kind of restrictive. And by that, I mean, we have, oh, that's how you found, well, Tracy, then this is going to be a trip down memory lane for you. You know, this will be a trip down memory lane. Hey, Queen Quiche. I knew he was going to get a decade, said Queen Quiche. Yeah, you know, here's the thing. This is a very interesting case in terms of sentencing because both sides have argued incessantly about whether or not he should be looking at the kind of time that he's looking at. But normally what happens is the defense, hey, Tommy Bird, hey, Caroline in Canada, Queen Quiche, good to see you. You could end up really on different ends of the spectrum. What I mean by that is you put together what's called a pre-sentence investigation. And then the prosecution and the defense looks at it. And the prosecution looks at the federal sentencing guideline sheets. And each thing is going to drive it down. I did a show on this. I said, stop looking at what you're looking at because there are a lot of things that enhance it. People were saying he's going to get 30 months. I looked at the guidelines. The guidelines get enhanced by things. And the judge has a whole lot of latitude. There was a case called Booker versus the United States where they sued for the opportunity to go and make the guidelines actually guidelines, as opposed to things that a judge had to stick to. It also meant that the defense could take guidelines and argue things and say, you know, because before that it was the guideline is from 32 months to 54 months. Well, you're getting somewhere in there. It's at the judge's discretion. Now a defense can say, I don't agree at all with what the prosecution is saying, and I think the guidelines are wrong. Here is why, and you can argue that. So in that vein, the defense is asking for 14 months, which would mean with time off for good behavior for halfway house, which you get about 6 months in the feds, usually on halfway, he'd be walking out the door, right? The defense is asking for time served. You can think of it any way you want, but the defense is saying he's done enough time, let him out. Normally you would see, hey, B-Lady, normally you would see the prosecution then somewhere in that range. Instead, the prosecution is asking for the top of the guidelines, which is a good sign that they don't like this guy. Normally they will say anywhere in the guideline. They're asking for the top of the guideline, which is 11 years and 4 months, I believe, right? Which really means that the guideline would be from somewhere probably about 70 months up to 120 or 80 months up to 120, somewhere in there. I don't think Judge Subramanian has a snowball in hell's chance of getting up there and saying, tell you what, we're going to let Diddy go on 14 months. It's not going to happen. And here's why. In the state, if a judge wants to go, well, I heard everything that was said in that trial, but he beat that. In the feds, a federal judge can say, yeah, the prosecution brought back not guilty on all of these charges, but the testimony that I heard from the people I find credible. In other words, the first offer that they gave Diddy was 20 years, man. 20 years. And he turned down that offer. This will be one of the first times in my lifetime that I've ever seen somebody in the feds not take the deal, go to court, get sentenced, and get less time. That's almost unheard of. I'm not being funny. It's almost unheard of because for most cases, you don't have the, first of all, the unbelievable disparity between the 14 months and the 120 months is fascinating. The defense says he's absolutely guilty. He's already been denied bail and rejected a new trial. He's getting time. Oh, make no mistake, he's getting time. That I promise you is not the question. He's not walking out at 14 months. There is no chance on God's green earth. One of the things that keeps getting brought up is that this man tampered with the court system. He made efforts, right, lots of them, to try to make sure that he didn't end up doing time. And I mean, outside of the normal court stuff, working hard with lawyers, hiring lots of paralegals, making sure that you have both representation, male and female, so that depending on who you're asking questions to, you never come across as a jerk. He was able to do all that because he has a lot of money. But they're trying to sell this narrative of that he's in there right now being terrorized. I promise you, that's probably the truth to some level. We've talked about this a lot on the show when I did a lot of Diddy stuff. And the truth of the matter is, this is a guy that probably doesn't have a doing time kind of disposition. And by that, I mean, if you've spent your life pampered, and let's be honest, this man spent his life pampered, right? He had a chef that lived in his house. He had a bartender on staff. Going from there to MDC Brooklyn is going to be a really tough thing. And there's going to be a lot of people in there. What's that? Yeah. There's going to be a lot of people in there that aren't really happy that he's there. Terry McMullen, good to see you, man. This is one of those situations where people don't like their routine messed with. In prison, they call it programming. You get up in the morning, you do what you're going to do. And if somebody causes that program to get broken up at all, the fellas don't take to it kindly. So when you get somebody that's really, really famous who comes in, and I've been in places where fairly famous inmates have been doing time, and they go one of two ways. They're the focus of all of the attention, or they do everything within their power to disappear. I don't spend a lot of time talking to people. They go to hang out in their cell. I guarantee you that he's complaining nonstop. He's talking about all the famous people that he's had sex with. He's doing a lot of stuff that the fellas probably don't want to hear. And I would imagine for the first couple of months, it was like, cool, I'm in a unit with Diddy, right? But I would imagine after a period of time, they started getting sick of it. Allegedly, he's getting all kinds of threats and whatnot. Well, he's a teacher in jail now. He's hoping that it will get him a light sentence. Yeah, that doesn't really fly. It really doesn't. Now, and this is an important distinction. If you have a job in there and you're going to programming, so you're doing NA, AA, things like that, those are all things that look good for the judge before sentencing. However, if you're also complaining that you feel like everybody in there is trying to kill you, you start to look like you're working every angle. If you went in there and acted contrite and said, I feel bad about what I did and I've been trying to do this since, it's not going to come off like that. And it's probably not going to sway the judge a whole lot. One of the other things that Subramanian can do is he can have witnesses come in and make statements before Diddy's sentencing, witnesses that weren't called to the stand in the case. So a lot of these people out there that were like, we don't know that she was going to be a great witness to put on the stand. Well, there's no witness. She's going to get up and make a speech, or he's going to get up and make a speech. There isn't going to be a defense attorney going, hey, on such and such a date. No, this is just impact statements. You feel that? Yeah. I don't know if you guys saw the camera move, but we just had a bit of a shake in this place. Nothing like the last one, though. Not worth getting upset about. I assumed he's getting that he's getting his sleazy butt kissed. I wouldn't assume that. You can only buy so much store, and you get to a point where you start getting tired of people taxing you, or your family doesn't come through with cash on time. You can buy your way out of a lot of stuff, but this guy's got a kind of a messed up case, right? There's a lot of people in there that are going to look at this dude as a rapist, and they don't usually fare well in prison, period. But he's not in a soft joint. I mean, he really isn't. I'm sure he's in protective custody, but people make a big deal about protective custody. And it's like, I've said it a million times, protective custody is filled with gang-banging killers who pissed off their own gang. You follow me? Man, I bet he's feeling like every step he takes, every moves he makes, I'll be watching you. Yeah, Tommy Bird, that's exactly what's going on. I promise you now. Can new charges come? Well, I found information. Sweet. Yes, they can charge him with new crimes. They can't charge him with anything he's already beat, right? Double jeopardy as a concept in the United States, most people do not understand. For instance, if they charge you in the state and you beat it, the feds can pick up that case and charge you with the same case. And people go, that's double jeopardy. It isn't. You have to, if you beat a case in the feds, like when O.J. Simpson, he was in the state and they tried to convict him for killing his wife. He beat it. If 3 days after that sentence, they found evidence somewhere stashed in the woods that absolutely tied him to that case, they're not reopening it. When a person is found not guilty, they're not going to open it very likely to charge another case because that is the definition of double jeopardy. But yeah, they could charge him on crimes that he hasn't yet been charged with. And there's a chance that that might happen. If so, I hope they do it in a state court instead of a federal court. I think RICO might not have been the best of charges to go after him for. If they had just gone out to California with that video of Cassie getting beat up and tried to get him into a California system that way, I think that would have been a much better spent money, because the feds blew a fortune prosecuting Sean Combs for apparently no reason. I mean, honestly, and I don't mean that the guy didn't deserve it. I just mean that if you deserve what you're getting, maybe sit down and take a conversation and say to yourself, how easy is it going to be to explain to 12 people how the RICO statute is applied in this case? And the problem is often, it gets back to what we talk about on the channel all the time, is that you find echo chambers. So you sit in a room with 5 paralegals, 4 or 5 attorneys, right? And you start having a conversation about this, and it makes so much sense to you. But you went through a lot of school having this kind of stuff explained. Some YouTubers I follow are going down to the courthouse for the overflow room on Friday. I would imagine a lot of people would like to be at that. This has been a very big thing on YouTube. I bowed out of it because the sensationalism behind it is ridiculous. Sean Diddy Combs, I think, is probably guilty of about 10% of what people said. The way that the freak off thing took off and the conversations that were had about it. And I got wrapped up in it. I really did. And then I started doing critical thinking, which we talk about here a lot. Critical thinking is essential. For instance, he has tunnels under his house in Florida. His house in Florida is in a place called Star Island. And I don't know how much you know about construction. I live on a peninsula. If I go out right now and dig down 8 feet, I'm in water. It's a very difficult thing to make a tunnel. Doesn't mean that it can't be done. However, for the amount of time that house has been constructed, like from when he got it, it just doesn't pass the smell test that they were able to get in there with equipment and build tunnels. Certainly not on a man-made island, a very small little. And then when you look at the one out in California, when that raid took place and they jumped downstairs, there's definitely a tunnel there. And allegedly it went out to a grotto or a pool. It also had enough trash in it to look like a trailer park. Now, sure, maybe they piled trash up into the opening of that tunnel on a regular basis to make it look like it's not a tunnel. And maybe there really is a Starbucks inside it. But that stuff doesn't pass the smell test with me. And I feel when things start feeling like they're BS, I can keep making a lot of money on it. I mean, there were the Diddy months are like, they were good money. But if you start feeling like the stuff that you're talking about is BS, you probably ought to back up. The trial was rushed. They should have waited 2 years or more. Well, that wasn't an option. Here's why. You are entitled in the United States of America to a speedy trial. And the reason for that is, in a lot of countries, they'll throw you in jail and you can sit there for 5 or 6 years before your case comes up. Well, that's kind of a bummer if you're found not guilty, right? So in places like that, they start to prosecute people that they just don't like. So in the United States, you have a right to a speedy trial. And very often, depending on the state, that could be 90 days, 120 days, 6 months. It just depends on the state. They wanted the fastest trial they could possibly get, the defense. And that made a hell of a lot of sense, man. Hey, Jeremy Fowler, good to see you. It made a lot of sense for that to happen. Hold on one second. That wasn't the one I was looking for. Isn't that odd? New York State is full of tunnels, especially in New York City. Well, there used to be like a pneumatic subway that ran on water underneath the city in New York. So there are a lot of abandoned tunnels under there. There's a lot in most big cities because they bury conduit, they bury electric, they bury all those things. And very often they become hangouts for people. Yeah, he was guilty of prostitution, which most people say that's only a year charge and most men do it. Well, it's a little different than prostitution. So if he was charged with prostitution, what he'd be facing is a little bit less. But what he's charged with is the Mann Act. And the Mann Act is taking someone across state lines for the purpose of pimping, pandering, whatever you want to call it, paying for sex, right? That becomes a different thing. And I'm sure it sounds to the rest of the world like it's not. But very often these things are done by people who have considerably more stature, I guess, wealth, right? They're able to transport people. Diddy was putting people on airplanes to fly them out for these, well, they called them freak offs. I think they were probably just swinger parties. I think that there are definitely people that he sexually assaulted. But some of the stories that came out about the guy that was pistol whipped in behind the curtain inside a store in New York City while they were having some form of promotion for Sean John. So this store's got what, 300-400 people in it, right? And they're waiting for Diddy. And 3 feet away from all of those people, this guy is going to, come on, Katie. He he's so freaked out that, he's just been pistol whipped. If he just screamed at the top of his lungs, there would have been 400 people that would have rushed in there to see what happened. That kind of stuff, you start looking into the critical thinking and you go, that doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, yeah, bold is one thing, but some of the stories that came out just started to get so ridiculous. And it almost seemed like each one had to up the last one. And I'm not kidding. By the end of the story, we were talking about human sacrifice in some of these tunnels. And you know what? I'm not here to tell you that it didn't happen, but there sure as hell is not enough proof that it did, that I'm going to come out here and talk to people about it. It creates a feeding frenzy of sorts, and I don't ever want to be a part of that. The B lady says the Mann Act needs to be eliminated. The last time was used for Jack Johnson, if I am not mistaken. You are mistaken. It has been used a crap load since Jack Johnson. Now, it's a very famous case. The Jack Johnson case was very famous. For a long time, this was a black law. To be sure, this was a black law. And it was, especially at a very racist time in this country, that absolutely is the truth. And it isn't just Jack Johnson. Chuck Berry, I believe, was charged with the Mann Act. There are a lot of people that it looked like they were really seriously going after black people, but there have been plenty of white people that have been charged with it as well. One of the other fallacies you hear is that they never give more than a year or two for it, and that is just absolutely not the case. Should we get rid of the law? That's probably something that makes sense when you hear it the first couple of times. But when you get rid of a law like that, what you're saying is, well, it's cool to pay and put someone on an airplane or a train or a bus or a car and take them across state lines for sex. And you go, who cares? These are prostitutes making tons of money. Well, that's not what the law says. The law doesn't say you can't take prostitutes who make a lot of money across state lines. The law is written so that people at the very bottom of the spectrum and people at the very top of the spectrum, in terms of how much money people charge, whatever, within a specific crime. So there's a lot of leeway. And once you repeal a law like that, then what you're saying is, you can grab somebody and take them across lines for sex. And that starts to become issues because there was a reason the law was written, and it wasn't specifically, it wasn't just for, to punish a specific race. There have been a ton of white people that have been charged with this. When you start transporting people across state lines for sexual commerce, okay, if we eliminate that law, then somebody that grabs somebody 19 years old who just got into our country illegally from Mexico and flies them to San Francisco to start selling that person, that person's of age. If we don't have a law in place there, we can probably get him for attempting prostitution. The Mann Act is going to put him in the feds, and it's going to give him a jacket that will follow him for the rest of his life in a way that the other will not. And it was set out with really good intentions, like so many other laws. However, these laws often get used by cudgels by people that maybe aren't as ethical or have a political or a racist kind of a slant to them. Man pandering, I don't know. Well, you bring up an interesting point. This is something that is quite fascinating with this case, is that a lot of the people that were being transported are men. And it brings up a really interesting question because men and women are treated really differently. There's a teacher, you may have seen this case. If not, I will be doing a show on it in the near future. Not because I intend to get into a ton of true crime anymore, but I'm super fascinated by this case. For personal and other reasons, but this is a female teacher that molested male students, a grip of them. Put a 2 in the chat if you know what I'm talking about. People, I need a tissue. Give me 1 second. There you go. I keep it up here on the table, but that rotten cat knocks everything off the table onto the floor, and by that I mean the white one. So this woman is being charged with 47 different counts, 47 different counts, including the fact one of them is that she had an orgy with underage kids that she had wear masks to hide their faces. Her husband got involved and threatened kids. It's a really horrific case, but I'm really interested to see what's going to happen to this woman, because these things should be applied even-handedly, if you ask me. If it was a guy who had done this to girls of the same age, there wouldn't be anybody going out saying, well, come on, these people didn't suffer from this. Those boys are going to be screwed up for a very long time. I promise you. You got to take my word on this one. It's going to screw them up for a really long time. And I'm curious, because if this had been a man, this is a life sentence. It's nothing but a life sentence. So I'm going to be really interested to see how the law is applied in this case. I'm definitely going to talk about it. It was a teacher, and I can't believe teachers had relations with students, even high schoolers. Well, yeah. The Menendez brothers weren't believed because they're men. There's a lot of truth to that, I think. Now, I really took a really good hard look at the Menendez case because we had been talking about it so much, and I don't want to be on the wrong side of history. Now, there are some things from that case that hurt the Menendez brothers badly. One of them was that the older brother had written a college paper. It was a play that he wrote for a class about two brothers that killed their parents with shotguns. And that thing was written 1.5 years before he killed his parents. That doesn't prove that he wasn't molested. Obviously, he could be. Both of them could have been. And maybe this was just a fantasy. It was them living this out before they actually had the guts to do it. That's a possibility. They also went on a spending spree after their parents died that was kind of legendary, including some watches that I would really like to own and a couple of Porsches. And these kind of things clouded the water, especially in the environment that this happened in the very late 80s, right? So there are some things that have made it a little bit more difficult, I think. It's also parenticide, right? They killed both parents. I can see blowing away dad. I can. I don't justify it, but I can see it if you're doing linear thinking. This person hurt them. Now, the argument has always been from the other side that mom let this happen, and that's why mom got blown away. It would have been really great if the witness that came out all those years later, if we had had that knowledge back then, I think the boys probably wouldn't have been convicted. But there were just 1 million people that said that the old man Menendez just wouldn't have done that. And in years later, we found out that while he was managing the young band Menudo, and if you're not familiar with that band, they were huge in Latin American countries. And it was kind of one of those bands, a little bit like the Monkees, like they put all of these kids together. They were all very young men. And as they grew up, they bumped him out of the band and got a younger kid to replace him. So the band went on forever. They just didn't age. And allegedly, he molested a guy in the group for a period of time while the guy was still in the band and young. That would have gone a long way, right? Yeah, the spending spree was stupid. It definitely was. That was the Menendez brothers said that they were abused by their parents. Yeah, they were abused by the father and that the mother let it happen. But I do believe that it would have been a very different case if it had been a woman. And this is something that is a difficult subject to talk about because people get, the Monkees did rock. I love the Monkees. People get upset when you have conversations like this, but this is not a criminal question for me as much as it is sort of a psychological question. A lot of times if a kid who's 16 ends up with a teacher, the people that find out about it don't react anywhere near the same way very often as it would be if it was on the other foot and it had been a male teacher and a female student. That woman is instantly a victim, and the boy gets a sort of a slap on the back. Good for you, noogies kind of thing. And I think that's probably unhealthy. Hello, Linda. Good to see you. Kathy, what's happening? This is going to be really interesting. Any guesses on how this will go? I don't think that Subramanian is going to max him out at 11 years and 4 months. I don't know how it works on this particular kind of case. I know that in bank robbery or gun running, if they wanted to go above the guidelines, they had to write, if the judge was going to go against the guidelines, he can do what he wants. If the prosecution wants to go above the guidelines, they had to send out paperwork to let the defense know exactly what they were going for so that the defense had time to prepare. It's fascinating that the defense came back with 14 months. They want time served, which is just ridiculous. It's not going to happen. And I guess they could be doing this like a negotiation tactic where somebody goes, it's going to be $4,000 to fix your car. And you go, I'll give you $35. And then you're going to meet somewhere in the middle. I don't think that's going to fly here. They're going to march a lot of people through the court that we didn't see in the trial. And Judge Subramanian can take into account everything he heard in that trial. Whether or not he was found guilty of it or not, the judge can say, I believe that. And for that reason, I'm going to take that into account as I sentence you on the 2 lighter crimes. He has at his disposal to slap this dude hard if he really wants to. I don't think he'll max him out at 11.4, but I think 120 months is probably what he's going to look at. I think 10 years is pretty realistic. And if you go back and look at what I said when he first beat the case, I'm pretty sure that I predicted 10 years back then. The fact that the prosecution is asking for 11 years and 4 months probably makes them sick. I think they'd probably like to ask for life. They know this case more than we do, right? We have been subjected to an amazing amount of disinformation on this, which is really unfortunate. It really is. The guy's a scumbag. I'm not here to defend Sean Puffy Combs in any way. He's one of the most reprehensible people I think that ever ended up on earth. However, the things that were said in the press and some of the lawsuits that were being filed civilly, We're at just fiction. They really are. Wait, I thought after he was charged with crimes, that was it. How can the judge take into account what folks say on Friday? So in the federal system, you have what is called victim impact statements, which can be made at sentencing. Now, Sean Combs can have his entire family get up at sentencing. He can have his minister get up at sentencing. He can have doctors get up at sentencing and make a statement prior to sentencing. That's de rigueur on both sides, right? You can do this. This is no problem. What is unusual in the feds is that normally in the state, if the person isn't part of the defense or the prosecution, then they're not going to get up and be able to make an impact statement. They'll allow family, things like that. But if there's a witness that didn't testify, they're not going to show up and go, yeah, he raped me too. In the feds, that absolutely can be done. The feds have leeway that they do not have in the state. And Judge Subramanian, and I am a believer, I'm not being blasphemous, but on that day, he's God. I mean, he has the ability to throw this man's life away, or he has the ability to give him a little bit of hope. Sean Combs should write a textbook on how not to go into court, how not to interact with the judge. The judge is not an idiot. The judge has been dealing with federal cases for a really long time. Prior to that, he dealt in the state. He knows that when the defense comes in and says, this ought to be time served, that there's no way in hell that the defense attorney, who's a good one, believes that this ought to be 14 months. He knows he's sitting in a room with that dude and Diddy's going, screw you, 36 months. I'm not doing more time. This isn't even like a prison yard. You're going to send me someplace where I can go out on a yard and be around people that I'm not locked away from, and I don't want any part of that. And the judge is pretty intelligent. If this had been anybody other than Diddy, the defense would have come in and said, how about 40 months? How about 46 months? Knowing that he's got a year in, right? So he's got a year in. On 46 months, he probably would have been out at about 37 months with a low criminal history score. That's what most people would have done. And I'm not basing that on the sexual offense stuff. I'm basing that on this is what happens in federal sentencing. There's a give and a take. This one's ridiculous. The prosecution wants the top of the sentencing guidelines, and the defense wants to depart from the guidelines by 80%. That downward departure is never going to happen. It's not. They can argue why the judge might want to go down. If the judge does, I would imagine that the 70-month rate is probably realistic. Okay, this question might be out of line, but has anyone tried to bribe the judge to let him off or only give him 2 to 3 months? Just wondering. No, I would guess absolutely not. Now, if it had been a different judge, but the way that Subramanian was talking about the entire situation from Jump Street, this is not a guy you want to try to bribe, because he'll go, sure, meet me at the such and such, and there'll be cameras. And no, I don't think this is a guy you buy. And I think that the reason that Subramanian was put on this case is because he's not the kind of cat you could buy. He's also not the kind of cat that was going to be impressed by this guy's fame or fortune or who he slept with or any of those things. Every single chance he has had to look like he's a critical thinker, he has delivered on. I have a lot of hope for this sentencing. Yeah, I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk. I don't know that I'll cover it live. I might. Yeah, I might cover it live. I don't know. But if not, I'm going to be talking about it right afterwards. And by live, I mean I would be talking with somebody that's there. Diddy is not attractive. He got women by his money only. Yeah, you would have to think so. Forget the attractive part, because there's a lot of women that fall in love with guys because of characteristics, not because of looks, right? It's an interesting thing to research sometime. But if you ask guys, right, usually, what do you like in a woman? You get answers like blonde, this height. I like girls with nice feet. These are things that men say. Women say, I want a guy that can make me laugh, right? I want a guy that has confidence. These usually are not physical attributes. Now, maybe the way the guy carries themselves or whatever. He doesn't have charisma. He has money. I tend to agree with you on that, B-Lady. I really do. And he's not stupid, not in the traditional sense of the word. He makes really bad decisions. And I think that something probably happened to him as a kid that has caused him to believe that he can do whatever he wants to whoever he wants sexually. And that's a problem. Kelly Esposito, good to see you. Linda, I'm glad you're here. And he can't sing either. Yeah, never been a big fan of his music. And he is an asshole all around. I'll agree with that. I'm not defending the guy. All I'm saying is that a lot of what was put out there was garbage. However, for me, the Cassie Ventura video would have been enough. Anything else is just not all that important. But that's me. I love a poor man who makes me laugh. Well, that's a beautiful thing, Valerie, and I'm happy for you. That's, you know what? Rich, poor, right? White, black. I hope everyone's man is making them laugh and feel protected. Those are good things. They really are. So to recap, I'm predicting Subramanian is going to come in at about 120 months. I don't see him dropping below the guidelines, especially because, for a quick recap, he is a master manipulator and he's charismatic. That's his allure. You're absolutely right. He's a master manipulator. Here's the fascinating thing, though. So if you remember the case, because I covered the crap out of this, right? But do you remember when they did the raid on his on the prison just to get into his cell? That's not how it went down. They search cells constantly. They do those things all the time. They're training routines. If you've done prison time, they're going to hit you with that once or twice a year. It's just kind of how it happens. And he happened to be in there. But they got a notebook and they claim that it said legal mail on it. Can't go through legal mail. If it does not say legal on the outside of it, they can read it. They can still open it and shake it out to see if you got needles or, tattoo needles or drugs or anything hidden in there, knives, razor blades. However, they cannot read it. Now, it did not say law. They took a picture of it. And then afterwards, they wrote legal, do not open on it afterwards. But whether or not they say that the jury can see that, the judge had to read it to rule on it. In the feds, he can take that into account. So the fact that he tried to tamper with this case, because that's what it said in that book, it was a list of the people that they could reach, either by threat or by money or by whatever. But he had a list of names and how they could get to them, kind of thing. Judges, that's like calling somebody's mom a bad name, right? Judges get really salty when you start having zero respect for their system. And you will get slapped in a way that is hard to believe. So I'm going to be really, really shocked if Subramanian does less than, maybe 9 if he's feeling magnanimous, or as they say as you're waiting to get sentenced, most people will tell you, man, I hope your judge gets green lights on the way to court, right? I don't believe that this is that type of case. And the reason I say that is this. A federal judge might see 4 bank robbers in a day, but none of those people are anything other than a case. This has been a phenomenon. So my gut would tell me that Subramanian, his mind is made up, and it's probably been made up for a really long time on the Sean Combs issue. This is going to be his opportunity to deliver on that. I didn't think Diddy treated anyone nice. Well, he sure as hell didn't in the court, right? No, by treating people nice, he would offer to pay off people that he had already treated poorly. He is absolutely a lowlife. I hope he gets slapped into the next dimension. Well, here's where it's going to be fun for old Sean Diddy Combs, right? And I think this is worth talking about. Everyone says he's been in prison for a year already. Let me assure you, he has not been in prison yet, right? Where Sean Combs is right now is a jail. This is where people are all awaiting trial before they get sent off to wherever they're going to go or go home. And what that means is you got a lot of people in there that are riding on different kinds of emotions. But one of those emotions constantly is hope, right? Until they sentence you, Diddy's in there right now thinking, yeah, they're going to give me that 14 months. If not, I'll get 22. Because if you don't think that way, you'll go insane. And then when you go down there and I was going in thinking I was getting 34 months. And I assure you, I didn't get anywhere near that. And once you get the real numbers, when you start doing time, he'll spend about another 2 weeks at MDC Brooklyn, maybe 3, depending on what time of year, right? So we're going into, he'll do no more than 2 weeks. He might even be gone in 7 days. Or they may be so sick of him that they put him on a train, which is what the fellas call it. He could be on the next train smoking. That's an expression you hear. When they want you out of a prison, you're on the next train smoking. Is Diddy going to be sent to a prison in New York? And can he have visitors, do you think? I don't think that Diddy will be sent to a prison in New York. He could be. Probably Fort Dix, right, is a federal prison that's fairly close to there. But they could shoot him to California without an apology. In theory, they're supposed to try to keep you within 500 miles of where you live. That's not a possibility. So what they've done instead is they say that when you are 6 to 8 months from your out date, they will send you to the closest facility to your home. That's been the compromise. It costs a lot of money to move an inmate from one place to another. And the BOP's general thought process is if you're from New York and I put you in a prison in New York, the people that are going to come and visit you are going to bring you drugs. If you're from New York and I put you in prison in Texas, the odds that the people from New York are going to come to Texas to bring you drugs are much smaller. And that is a consideration, especially if the person is a drug addict. right? And Sean Combs is absolutely a drug addict. Whether he's using every day now is, I would imagine, is unlikely. There's a lot of dope in that place, but I doubt a lot of it is getting into the protective custody part of that prison. But when he gets to a real prison, these people have all kinds of time to figure out ways to get dope into prison. So when you get to regular prison yards, there's a lot of drugs. And if you're a guy that the world thinks has $400 million, you would not believe the amount of money that he could blow in a prison doing dope. I've seen prison yards where a gram of heroin was $700. Now, for a guy with unlimited funds, he could be doing 7 or 8 grams of that a day, and he could do it for his entire sentence. I can't see the feds letting that happen. I really can't. You sort of have to be one of those fly under the radar kind of guys, and Diddy is not a fly under the radar kind of guy. If you fail a drug test in the feds, unless you are at a United States penitentiary, that drug failure, one of them, will get you shipped off that yard. They're going to send you to another prison, and they're going to up your custody level. I don't think the Mann Act is going to demand that he gets sent to a United States penitentiary. So he's going to go to what they call an FCI, which is a federal corrections institution, because that is a sexual crime. He can't go to a low, and he can't go to a camp. So once he is convicted, he's going to go to an FCI. They have an FCI at Fort Dix. I think it's logical. It's in a different state, but it's close enough to home. I think that there's a chance he could end up at Fort Dix. I don't think he'll make it there. I really don't. It's not a PC yard, right? Or at least it wasn't when I was in. It's a cushy yard. There's not a lot of fighting. But you put a guy like that on that yard, and it'll change everything real quick. It's amazing how putting somebody whose personality is known throughout the country onto a yard can change the entire dynamic of how everybody else interacts. It's a fascinating thing. It really is. So is where he's at not very harsh? No, it's wicked uncomfortable. So one thing, to get one thing straight, he's going to be more uncomfortable where he is. Now, the fellas ain't going to be as harsh, but he's going to be way more uncomfortable where he is. When he gets to the next yard, he can buy sweatpants, he can buy brand new shoes, he can buy a radio, not much more than that, MP3 player. And then you can buy food, a lot of it. Not like what he can get at MDC Brooklyn. He can buy a lot of food. And up to $360 a month. And it's not just candy bars and some tortillas and ramen noodles. They actually have there's a pretty long list. It's 2 or 3 pages that you can buy stuff from. So hold on one second. Would love to see him on a chain gang. Yeah, that wouldn't suck. They do still do chain gangs. Absolutely, they still do chain gangs. Chain gangs are still done. And probably always will be. They don't always lock people onto literally the chain anymore. But if you're working outside and they got one guy watching 60 people, trust and believe you're going to be chained to the person next to you. If that sounds bad, I have been chained to people in my life. I can't tell you how many times. And I've told the stories on here before, but they cannot have TVs. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're on a yard, you can't watch television, because the day room, which has big concrete poles on it, will have 1, sometimes 2 TVs on each pole, and they'll face in different directions. And because it's so civilized in there, there's a black TV, there's a Mexican TV, there's a white TV, there's a news TV, there's a sports TV, and then there's one extra usually for Asian Islanders, or sort of an overflow if you're not one of the races that I just mentioned. But what you do is you take your radio, and the first TV, it'll say 89.9 FM. So you put it to 89.9 FM and you can listen through your earphones. That way you don't hear the TVs when you walk in the day room. You can see them, but there's no noise. That would cause problems. One person would raise their TV louder, and they've tried all that stuff. None of it ever worked. My friend's son is in jail in Tennessee, and he is locked up with many others in his cell. And she has to buy everything for him: toothpaste, blankets, soap, etc. I'm not telling you that that's not the truth, but everybody pay attention to this. Inmates every single one of them will say the exact same things to get money. Now, there are places, I was at a place where if you were going to have a pillow, you had to buy it. That was in the state. In the feds, you don't get a pillow and you can't buy it. Can't have a pillow in the feds, right? So you sleep with a jacket rolled up underneath you or whatever, because you're not going to get a pillow. But very often people work family members. Like when I first got out, a woman called me and said, my son just called for $250. Hey, back. And I said, can I ask you a question? She said, sure. I said, did he get in a fight with somebody? And the person's, because this was a Fed. I said, and the person's MP3 player got stepped on during the fight. And now if he doesn't pay for a new MP3 player, they're going to beat the crap out of him. And she went, how did you know that? I said, because that's the only $250 hustle in there, right? because when I was in there, that's what the going rate for a MP3 player was. That way, if the family member or anyone else said, it's $250, you could mail them home one of the shopping lists, show them you're telling the truth. And of course, they don't want you to get hurt. More than likely, that stuff's not going to end up buying soap or other things. That he could be the best person on earth. I'm just telling you my experience from being inside. There are a lot of really honest cats in prison, and there are a lot of people that aren't. And the ones that aren't, I knew guys in there that had no support from the street that lived off of $19 a month getting put on their books because that's what they earned working in the kitchen. You can survive on that. You absolutely can buy all the hygiene, anything you need. And if you can't get hygiene, they will give you hygiene, right? Where her son is at, she can only send items from Amazon or Walmart. Oh, well, that's a beautiful thing. Put money on his books, no cash. Well, money on books is cash because what happens is you put money on books and they buy stamps or they buy food products or they buy whatever the guy that's selling alcohol or drugs is going to hook them up with. However, in most places, right, it is a law that they have to provide hygiene. That is actually a law, state and fed. So toothpaste now, by way of full disclosure, I remember a dentist saying to me, because they'll give you as many tube of toothpaste as you want. They're this big, but they'll give you 20 of them if you ask for it. And you can put it under your door to keep animals, insects from coming in because they won't cross that. If your window has cracks and stuff's blowing through, you use it as caulking. If you have pictures of people from the street, you put it on the back of it and stick it up on the wall and it will hold. Right? All of these things are great uses for toothpaste. Brushing your teeth, not so good. It's made in India. It tastes like acid. It's just absolutely foul. It really is disgusting. And they pay about a penny or two a tube. Really nasty. I went to jail here in Denver, and it sounds like it was the Hilton compared to other jails. I actually kind of had fun. I've actually been in that jail. And it really wasn't even all that bad for the guys. I've talked about that. Oh, you know what? I take that back. No, I have not. I apologize. I was in Boulder, Colorado. Whine a little bit more. Good to see you. So just to recap, if you just got here, my prediction is that the cat's going to do 10 years. He may get the 11-4. And Subromanian, if he wanted to, he could give him more. Keep in mind, again, this sounds crazy, but this is the federal system. It's not the state system. So if he believes that Sean Combs was guilty of everything he heard and he thinks that the jury messed up, he can take his personal experience on this case and use it to judge this man. Now, if by some chance he believed that he should have been found guilty on this, do you think that there's a chance in hell that he's going to give this guy 14 months, time served? If he thinks he's guilty of a RICO case, this guy's in an awful lot of trouble. You got a better chance of seeing our Lord and Savior in sunglasses than a person convicted of that particular crime getting any love in court in the federal system. Even if he is lucky enough, right, from an inmate standpoint, to get into the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit is the most liberal court circuit that we have in the United States. Guys will go out of their way to make sure that they can get to California before they file paperwork. So the nastiest penitentiary in the BOP when I was in there was Victorville. So guys would keep upping their points to get to Victorville. And after they've been there a year, now if they file, they're filing in the Ninth Circuit. It's not going to go back to where their original case was because now they're in California. And people will get out of very, very tough states and get into states that really, really are a lot easier on you. No, he cannot be in a camp. This is a sexual crime. He can't go to a camp. In fact, I've only heard of that ever happening once, and it happened to Ghislaine Maxwell. After doing some time in regular yards, they moved her to a camp. One of the reasons I think for that was it's really hard to get somebody in to interview somebody. And I think that they want to be able to talk to this woman a lot more. I don't know if that's good or bad, but Linda says, I was hoping for 15 years. He could get 20 if the judge wanted to break him off. I don't think that there's any chance in hell of that happening. I really don't. Not 20 anyway. Hold on one second. Sorry. Thank you very much for your patience. So, and as far as him doing soft time, if you got enough money, right? The old adage of life being a poo-poo sandwich. The more cash you have, the less poo-poo you taste, right? This is his second jail after he served his time in the first one. The second county was there to pick him up for probation violations. You know what? There's nothing worse than thinking that you just killed something and they take you to the next one. Here's the thing. Are there abuses in the BOP? Absolutely. Absolutely, there are abuses. I've told the story many times on the lifeboat. I got hung by my arms and worked like a speed bag by about 6 cops for hours on end. I mean, not the entire time, but each time they'd walk by that room I was in, they'd come and punch me a few times in the side. And I deserved what they were doing to me. And most inmates take that attitude. So when you do find people like this that want to start complaining, whether this is right, wrong, or whatever, I guess is up to the people in terms of their belief system. But there are people who believe that people inside prison have the rights to be treated exactly how they are on the street. That's never going to happen, right? Ever. So when you come there and say, I'm being abused, you better be being abused. I mean, like, they're targeting you, they're going after you, they're letting things happen to you that they know are happening to you. Because if you got your butt kicked and it took 40 seconds for the cops to get there and break it up, I promise you that's not abuse. That's just prison. And a lot of people know who he is, and his crimes are absolutely filthy. But Epstein didn't do an Epstein. You're damn right. I don't believe for 1 second that he killed himself. Everyone that testified against him could be in danger, right? You know, it depends on who you believe. Here's the thing. If I were Sean Combs, I'd be praying that the people that testified against me didn't stub their toe. Because God forbid something happens to any of these people, the first place they're going to go is to him. And we live in a world today, listen up if you are a bad person. We live in a world today where you couldn't do any of the stuff that I did growing up and get away with it. You just couldn't. Bank robbers don't get away with bank robbery anymore. Because when you leave the bank, there's a camera following you out to the parking lot. You get in your car, the 7-Eleven picks you up driving by. Then for a quarter of a mile, nothing. And then the library picks you up. And they just keep going down through all of the cameras and searching everything until they basically follow you to your neighborhood or to wherever you dumped the car. And then they pick up the license plate of the getaway car. There are cameras everywhere on planet Earth now. It used to be a lot easier to be a criminal. Now there are only dumb criminals. Because if you don't realize that you're on film everywhere, then you're probably shouldn't be in that line of work. Our oldest son back in the day was an advocate for prisoners and told me about them shutting off the cameras. Oh, make no mistake, that happens. Now, here's the thing. You can absolutely say that's abuse, right? And this is going to sound nuts, but even if you asked an inmate, they'd say, if if they turned off the cameras, is that abuse? They would say, why'd they turn off the cameras? Because there are times, like, you haven't lived until you've been in a prison where a guy comes in that literally doesn't care about anything in life. He's going to tear up everybody he can. He's going to break things. He's going to try to cause fights nonstop. And if the cops turn a camera off and beat the crap out of that dude, not on film, everybody in that room is cheering. That's not abuse. That's how you police somebody that can't be policed. And I know that sounds really harsh, but these are dangerous men, right? Prison is not filled with good people. You know, they don't round them up at churches and universities. Usually when we get caught, we're doing something really, really illegal. And I don't know, do your crime, do your time. Diddy probably thought that if you got enough money, you're never going to do time. And we've seen cases where really wealthy people manage to not do time. Not to mention the fact that the really wealthy, or more importantly, the really powerful, never do time. Never. What James Comey is being accused of currently, lying to Congress, people get convicted of lying to a federal official and they censure them. They put letters in files. If a regular convict does that, it's a 12-year sentence. I knew a guy doing 12 years for perjury to an FBI agent, or for lying to an FBI agent.
So we should wait till you get off.
Hold on 1 second, because I'm not very bright. Sorry about that. No, there are cameras in every room. I'll tell you something that I found really funny. The SHU, the segregated housing unit that Epstein was in, I've not been in that one, but I've been in, I can't tell you how many that are designed on the exact same layout, right? There are two types of SHUs in the feds. That's one. And it's usually, it gets nicknamed the MC Escher because there are so many stairs going up in every single direction. It looks like that famous MC Escher painting or drawing of the stairs going to nowhere, and they're going in all different directions. The other ones are just long hallways. That's not what was going on in that one. In my experience, they said there were 3 cameras in that day room. That's fascinating because I've never seen anything like that. There's one usually about every 6 to 8 cells, right? If you're going down a hall, they really map out the inside of a prison. Did anything ever happen to the group of guards you covered a while back that killed an inmate and detainees? That has not worked through its Debbie Zito, I don't believe that has worked all its way through the system. I do have an alert so that when things come up on that case, I get it. And there had been filings and other things, but I don't believe that's gone to trial yet. Those guys are in deep trouble. That was one of the most deplorable things ever. That is abuse. If you're going to go in there, and I mean, granted, that guy died, right? But if he hadn't, I've seen abuse that I would report, and that's not a convict kind of thing. But I've seen guards do things that were just so over the top that you can't justify it. But there are times where people become a danger. You know, if you do something wrong in prison, like you run up a drug debt that you don't pay, or you say something to somebody that you know is a word you can't say to somebody, and you get your butt kicked for it. Those are rules that are actually kind of laid out, and they're fairly intelligent. And I don't mean intelligent on the street. I mean intelligent in prison. There's a structure of some sort that keeps everyone from killing each other, especially between races. If I bump into a different race, literally, and the guy goes, man, I will kick your ass, that can't happen, right? There can't be fighting between the two races unless we go to the people that run those races and get approval to fight one another. They call it catching a fade or a one-on-one. So no one's going to jump in. You guys go to cell, beat the hell out of each other. Whoever wins, great. Whoever loses, we'll take care of. That happens. But if you just punch that guy, we're going to end up in a riot. So there has to be some kind of structure. It's ignorance. I mean, it's the dumbest stuff in the world. You get out, like the people on the street who go, it'd be so much better if it was like prison. Yeah, maybe do some reading, right? Find a book, maybe read a little, because if you think that's a good setup, then you're still dangerous. At least I view a prison video where a lady was charged with fentanyl in her urine or blood and refused to tell how she got it. This, soldiering up is a really big thing. However, this is a funny thing too. Hey, good to see you, Will. Some of us had to learn that the hard way. Yeah, there's nothing good, right? Honestly, about the system inside, but it's allowed, right? It's allowed because they like every race hating each other. The same reason the United States of America and is really happy when we're divided, because if you're divided, you're not mad at the guards, right? If you're spending all your time wondering whether or not this particular race or that particular race wants to get you, then you don't say things like, hey, we're living in a very inhumane kind of fashion. I think maybe 3 rolls of toilet paper a week might be reasonable, right? She took the severe lockdown instead of confessing. That's a beautiful thing. Inside, people don't tell. They really don't. People don't tell unless what happened is out of line, right? Really out of line. I've told the story on here before, but I got the bark beat off of me by a bunch of cops on Halloween night. I was in the shoe. I didn't have, and they hit me with asps, those metal things. I was in a jail, not a prison, and I did nothing. I was laying on my back. They came in because of who I had a relationship with. I had an attorney that I had a relationship with. They were not happy about that. She had been coming in and out of that jail for years, and they just came in and tuned me up. And then they panicked right after they did it, right? That I was going to, turn people in. And one of the guards actually let my attorney come down and take pictures of me because I looked like Eddie Van Halen's guitar. I just had stripes all over my body from when a metal thing hit me. And I didn't turn anyone in. I didn't try to go down that route. And as I was leaving, one of the people said, man, that was a stand-up thing. One of the people that beat me, by the way, who happened to be a woman. They really had a lot of people in there. But they said that was a stand-up thing. I said, that's not a stand-up thing. I said, if I tell on an inmate, they can send me to a yard where I don't have to deal with that inmate. If I tell on a cop, where are they going to send me? Right? Get a reputation as people that tell on cops and see what happens. So that's a really long and twisted answer. But the Chisley kid, he's going to have a jacket as somebody that tells on police. And that's not one you want. Hi, off topic, but I'm having an extremely bad day and could use and would love a prayer. Don Pucavista. Tell you what, there's some ones, and I'll even do it live, see if we can't drop a few more subscribers. Lord, do me a favor and look over Don Pucavista and anyone else who's struggling in the chat. Today, times are tough. This is a very difficult time for a lot of people. It seems like the world is crumbling around us. I pray for peace for all of the people that feel like a lot of us do, that maybe the world's out of control and we don't feel like we fit in it. I pray these things in your son's name, amen. And on that note, I'll bail off and see how many subscribers I lose. Tune in a couple of days because I will tell you what happened to Diddy, and I'll tell you, in my opinion, how he's going to spend the rest of his time in there. It's going to be interesting, and it will change depending on how much time he gets. I'll leave you with this. If they give him 120 months, the yard he's going to end up on is going to be a hell of a lot nastier than if they give him 50 months. right? The amount of time you do is very, very important when they start giving you what's called a yard score, right? Where they're going to send you. You have the score from what you did with the crime, and then you have what's called a yard score. The yard score determines through a place called Grand Prairie, Texas, that does all of this. That center decides where you're going to go, and normally they don't care who shows up. But if you're P. Diddy, when that one comes across the desk, they're going to go, "Holy crap, Sean Combs!" And the whole place is going to talk about it. Usually, it's just a bureaucracy. It sucks to be famous, especially if your crimes involve rape. Diddy, I don't think, is in for a pleasant stay at the Federal Bureau of Prisons, but we shall see. Between now and the next time I see you, put a little hope in your heart. I know things are ugly, right? But this too shall pass in one way or another. And get right with what you believe. It's a beautiful thing. See you on the next one. I'm Tommy. Goodbye.